uncertain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong with me, sing to me quietly? Will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me compassion, then I may learn to care as you do. Then I may learn to care. When I am angry, will you still embrace me? When I am thoughtless, will you understand? Will you believe in me? Stand by me willingly. Will you share some of your questions with me? If you will show me acceptance, then I may learn to love as you do. Then I may learn to give. When I am troubled, will you listen to me? When I am lonely, will you be my friend? Will you be there for me? Comfort me tenderly. Will you share some of your feelings with me? If you will show me commitment, then I may learn to love as you do. Then I may learn to love.
Thank you, Nick. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Community Church. Our building is on Shaver Road in Portage, Michigan, on the ancestral lands of the Peoria Potawatomi people. We pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. It is the little brick church with the rainbow flag and the Black Lives Matter banner out front, because we believe that love is love, and it is our responsibility to dismantle white supremacy and build a beloved community that benefits us all. Our church is served most Sundays by our minister, Reverend G. Ludwig McCartney. We are a community on diverse spiritual journeys, and on other Sundays, we enjoy hearing differing points of view from guest ministers, lay leaders, or as in today, a guest speaker. My name is Regina Nelson, and I'm happy to be your lay leader. If you are joining us on Facebook for the first time, welcome. We're excited that you tuned in. We invite and encourage you to attend the Zoom coffee hour following the service to get to know us better. You can find the link to coffee hour in the comments section of the video. To learn more about our church, including our programs for children and youth, and other opportunities to connect with us during the week, visit our website at www.uucommunitychurch.org. Special thanks to everyone who's helping to make this morning's service possible: our musician, our tech team, and you. Now it's time to light the chalice. On this day around the world, Unitarian Universalists light the chalice. We are truth seekers. We seek a truth that is so strong it can withstand our questioning and our doubts. The flame reminds us of what we have in common here, and so we bring it to life. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. It is National Coming Out Day, so our reading is in honor of this celebration. It is titled Singing a New Song. There comes a time to break the silence. There comes a time to move beyond the fear. There comes a time to speak one's truth, even if it will not be welcome. There comes a time to call into question what has gone before, to resist the weight of the past. There comes a time for the singing of a new song, for a different way of being, for the claiming of power. There comes a time when the truth shall at last make us free. One day, blessedly, the practiced lie dies on our lips, and the truth becomes more precious than the saying, and the pretending ends. There comes a time when somehow courage finds us, or we find courage, and we dare to know who we are and what we love. There comes a time when friends are there, holding us so gently in their love that all at once the impossible is possible, and we cross over to the other side of whatever bondage held us. There comes a time when the truth at last makes us free, and in that moment is the salvation of the world. It is my honor to introduce our speaker today, River Artz-Iffland, who currently serves as the Vice President of People's Church Board of Trustees and works with Isaac's Anti-Racism Task Force. She founded and managed Pandora Books for Open Minds in Kalamazoo from 1981 to 1998. She has also worked in childcare, factory, postal, retail, nonprofit, therapist, and a case manager position. River has found a spiritual home at People's Church, as well as education from many sources and encouragement to engage in her own existing and new avenues of activism. She firmly believes that she learns from every experience. Now I turn it over to River for her talk.
Good morning. Good morning, cousins. When I go to visit friendly churches, I usually say that I'm visiting my cousins. It reminds me of when I was a child and we would go visit family and catch up on what they were doing. It's always great to visit with you at the UUCC because I've worked with many of you on many different projects. Betty Yongley, way back when we were in National Organization of Women together, and Stephanie, and some of you I work with now on the Anti-Racism Committee, and Isaac. There's always more to be done. Anyway, I'm so happy to join you today. And the title of my talk is, "Oh no, not another learning experience." I posted this on my kitchen wall by the calendar to remind me that even though sometimes I feel like what's happening is too much, I can do it, or I can find a way to get through it, and I will learn from that experience. Life feels too often in 2020 like a huge learning experience. I've learned more than I want to know this year. And on good days, I believe that adversity strengthens us, that we can use challenges to become more resilient. On hard days, I don't care about learning or risking anything. I just want to feel comforted and safe. This isn't always possible. You all know this. Any of you could be having that kind of a day today. But part of being alive is that we take risks. You have chosen at UUCC to learn more about oppression this year. So I'm going to talk to you today about taking risks. I'm sorry if I'm reading too much, but so be it. Okay, so Regina already mentioned that today is National Coming Out Day, the 33rd National Coming Out Day. It grew out of the 1987 National March on Washington for Gay Rights. Homosexuals, as we were called then, were only discussed as mentally ill, perverted, or sinful. So to use the term gay as a positive term and to be out in public dressed in our best so that we were good poster children. Actually, I wasn't at that march, but I was a poster lesbian. Was a new thing. And March on Washington organizers, Robert Eichenberg and Jean O'Leary, didn't want to only respond defensively to negative stereotypes that they didn't believe. So they encouraged gays and lesbians to risk coming out and to celebrate our lives with the taglines, "We are everywhere," and come out wherever you are. I still have buttons that say those things from the 80s. We had to risk becoming visible to show people our humanity. We had to risk exposure, loss, and sometimes assault, verbally or physically, to win connections with people and to stay connected to those we love. In the United States, prior to World Wars I and II, many Americans lived on farms and in small towns, and they never traveled far from home. Homosexuals, as we were called then, because the new gay was a new term and people didn't even say lesbian. Anyway, homosexuals weren't named or discussed. Some thought we were freaks of nature, or homosexuals who lived in isolated places thought they were the only ones like themselves. That's a hard life to live. With a few exceptions, homosexuals who found each other lived hidden lives. They often married and had children as expected and required by tradition. Then came World War II. Especially during World War II, many homosexuals found each other in military service or women working in defense production factories. When discharged, these people didn't want to return home to isolation. So gay areas evolved in cities where soldiers and workers were discharged, such as San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York City, Chicago, Boston. Maybe some of you are familiar with other gay neighborhoods, which of course have grown now that things are more open. The new profession of psychiatry labeled homosexuals as immature or mentally ill. Churches claimed that we were sinners or possessed by the devil or that we perverted God's natural order. Not too much to live up to or feel positive about oneself or your relative or your friend if you found out that information. Gay neighborhoods were sanctuaries for people, and they were also dangerous because heterosexuals and self-hating closeted gays sometimes intruded to insult, assault, and vandalize people they didn't understand. Local police at that time raided gay bars and arrested patrons for gross indecency or public immorality. Their names and addresses were posted in newspapers after they were arrested, and many lost their jobs. Visible gays risked their jobs, their marriages, their families, the place where they lived. Yet some took these risks anyway to live their true lives. Some risks we choose, some we feel like we don't have a choice. It's just we have to. We have to try and be true to ourselves at great cost. Here's a story about two women who took a huge risk that paid off. Nell Phelps, who was called Johnny, was a Women's Army Corps sergeant, an adjunct to General Eisenhower during World War II. Higher-ups became aware of lesbians in the Women's Army Corps, and they ordered General Eisenhower to ferret out all the lesbians, quote unquote. Now, his WAC detachment was exceptionally well run. It was a motor pool and a secretarial pool. He told his adjunct, Sergeant Phelps, to find out and make a list of all the lesbians in the unit. Johnny took a huge risk and told General Eisenhower that she'd have to be first on the list. His secretary then stood up and said she'd be second on the list. Then they told General Eisenhower that he'd lose the majority of the 900 women in his detachment if he carried out this order. He thought for a minute, and then he said, ignore the order. Now, Johnny and the secretary, who's not named, saved the careers of several hundred lesbian women who would have been dishonorably discharged. In that moment, they took a risk, they made a choice that had huge consequences. Sometimes we get to do that, sometimes we don't. Here's another story about a young man from Kalamazoo. He became a student at the University of Michigan in the early 1950s. When he was discovered to be gay, he was expelled from the U of M and sent home. His family could afford it, so he attended weekly therapy for 2 years. That was his main job, was to attend therapy and become cured of gayness. After he was deemed cured, he eventually married and helped raise 2 sons and became a psychiatrist. He came out as gay again 40 years later when his wife had died and his sons were grown. When he was young, he learned through his risk to hide until he felt safe. But he became so afraid that it took 40 years till he felt safe. His life was drastically changed as he passed as heterosexual. Now, I'm not trying to be too negative here, but I'm trying to show you how things have changed. And hopefully you're thinking about how other situations need to change. People are protesting all around the country with Black Lives Matter because Black people in this country have not been treated well, and things need to change. They're taking risks, and we need to take risks too to help make that happen. Okay. I feel so lucky to have come out in 1974 when I was 22 years old. Now, I know people who still are coming out when they're 63. They've decided it's safe at that point, or life situations have changed that allow them to make that choice. Now, when I was young, I still knew gays and lesbians who had been disowned or fired from their jobs or involuntarily placed in mental hospitals. I knew women who had their children taken away from them. I knew gays and lesbians who had been arrested in gay bar raids. But none of those things happened to me because things were changing. I also knew gay men and one lesbian who died from AIDS in the 1980s and 90s when Reagan failed to make national policy that investigated AIDS for way too long. It's kind of similar to a situation we see now with COVID. Now, we used to say that every gay, lesbian, and we didn't use the terms bisexual or transgender then. We didn't know those words yet. But we used to say that every gay or lesbian person knew gay or lesbian people who had attempted or committed suicide. Life was harder. I think and hope that that's less true today. But I came out in a new era when African Americans, women, college students, and eventually gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people fought for our right to be seen and heard, and then for civil rights, as we see with the passage of marriage equality law just 5 years ago. Now, gays and lesbians often didn't feel safe to be visible until the 1980s. So we learned, well, we fit into other earlier movements. Many risks were taken, but on different fronts. For instance, it's now known that Bayard Rustin, who was an advisor to Martin Luther King, and he was a brilliant strategist, and he orchestrated Martin Luther King's 1963 March on Washington for Civil Rights. Now it's known that Bayard Rustin was a gay man. But at the time, as Rustin excelled in the Black civil rights movement, he was forced out due to his sexual orientation. It was considered a serious liability for the African American civil rights movement. Certainly, not all risks are equal, but we hopefully find a spot where we can contribute and we do what we can. Now, some risks cost us little. My 16-month-old granddaughter last week learned that she can't drink milk through a face mask. The only result of that risk is that she got milk all over her face mask. I had bought some children's face masks and she loves to wear it. But hopefully she learned from that experience and she won't try to drink milk through her mask again. Now, other risks have huge consequences, such as the young man who I met as an old man who was expelled from University of Michigan. And he became so afraid that the next 40 years of his life changed. So we try to plan and assess what risks we will take, even if we don't call it taking risks. We're always trying to guess at the outcomes of what our decisions might be. Today, young GLB or T students go off to college, where often they find support in campus groups and they come out on campus. Then they go home at Thanksgiving, and many choose to come out to family. They choose to risk being more fully known by their family that has supported them and loved them. And sometimes they succeed in a risk that works out well for them and their family. But they may risk their college funding being rescinded, or they may risk being rejected, sometimes temporarily, by their family, or even disowned. That's a syndrome, a thing that happens on college campuses, and now GLBT centers know to expect that after Thanksgiving and after the winter holidays. Parents who don't risk listening to their children can force their children into hiding or self-loathing and away from spiritual connections and healthy risk-taking. I'm afraid the largest categories of teen suicide and homelessness are still in the US GLBT teens. Now, my life is going pretty well, so if I didn't pay attention and read and listen to people, I might assume that GLBT life is good and that we're past all this, but it's not true. Now, I'm asking you to think about risks that you take or don't take and why, and to think about new risks you might be willing to take. Sometimes this requires intention. Many risks or decisions we automatically take just in the process of our daily lives, and we don't think about it, we just live. But sometimes we need to be intentional so that we do better and help make change happen. If the thing about if you do the same thing over and over and expect just different results, that's the definition of crazy. So we need to intend to do things differently sometimes. As Unitarian Universalists, we tend to read, listen, and learn more than many people. I love UU conversations because I always learn. And we UUs do work for social justice. A Protestant minister once asked me if UUs as a tenet of faith are required to volunteer. I answered that we don't have to confess or anything if we don't volunteer, but that UUs believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. So most of us do get involved in work that hopefully will create justice. Now, I think about sometimes, because I'm too serious and think about these things, I think about how the life I live can depend on choices I make and the risk I take or avoid. Sometimes I do well because I risked calling adoption agencies until I found an agency that would work with an out lesbian couple. My life changed dramatically for the better. I became a parent. My wife and I raised 3 wonderful daughters, and now she's deceased, and I have 3 gorgeous grandbabies. Our relationships with our birth families improved through our having children because they saw us. They were able to see us as a more traditional family. And of course, who doesn't love grandchildren? I do. A much easier risk might be if I am talking with someone and I tell them that my wife and I adopted from China. This offers the listener several options to respond. They can risk telling me about their gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender relative or friend. Or they can risk asking about racism towards Asians in the United States. Or they can risk less and talk about parenting or ask me how I like traveling to China. I risk, then hopefully you risk. Then we learn from each other. If we don't risk, we don't learn. We each have our own risk tolerances. We know the saying that we never know what the other person is carrying. And sometimes we have to be patient, and that includes being patient with ourselves. Now, fear decreases our risk tolerances. Right now, we live in a time where fear is being cultivated at the highest levels. And we have to try and keep our core, our balance, so that we're not governed by that fear. I'm tremendously grateful to an adoption agency that we attempted to work with years ago that largely placed Black children with white families. So they required applicants to think through extensive situations involving race and biracial families. For example, how would we feel if people didn't recognize us as our child's parent? How would we respond if our family rejected our child? How would we feel if our child dated our race? How would we feel if our child dated their race? How would we feel if our child was arrested, especially if it didn't seem fair or warranted? How would we feel when our child was discriminated against? Wow, this was an intense process. But again, I'm so grateful because it helped me so much to see anyone as a potential child or family member or friend. It taught me more about how hard it can be to be Black in the United States of America. It taught me more about how I could be an ally to someone who I love and want to be treated fairly and with respect. I think that's a huge problem with the police departments, that they see Black people, Hispanic, other minority people as other, they, them. They don't see them as potential family members or friends. Fear decreases our risk tolerance. So we need to find ways to increase our risk tolerances. lack of fear increases our openness, our willingness to see and to help make change. I encourage you to think this week about stepping out of your comfort zone more often. I've learned to push myself more. I do think that seeing oneself as a member of one minority can, if I choose, it can help me to see what happens for people in other minorities. And we all belong to several identities, whether we like labels or not. People see us as pretty or not, personable or not, the right race or not, the right sex or not. So we can work with that. I've learned to push myself more, to smile and say hello, to even engage in conversation with people I'm walking near or waiting in line at the grocery store with. I might feel a little uncomfortable, but sometimes I'm rewarded with a big smile and a good conversation. I try to listen as if I'm on the inside. I try to think, if I was you, then I might, okay? Maybe I would see it this way, not the way I see it as a white, middle class, older, lesbian, whatever, all my titles. It's helped me to interact more with the Syrian family we sponsored, to attend the Black Arts Festival, to attend Chinese New Year celebrations, to coordinate the transgender group at when it was called Kalamazoo Gay Lesbian Resource Center. It also has helped me in ways that you might not need help, such as attending as a sports mom with my kids' sports because I wasn't a sports person, or my middle daughter roped me into chaperoning at her prom, high school prom. I'd never been to a prom before, but I decided to be comfortable at this one, and it was fun. The more I put myself in different situations, step a little out of my comfort zone, the easier it gets. The more I wonder about why, how, what if things were different? I think it's really important to wonder, to not say I'm afraid, but I wonder. You know the saying, everything I need to know I learned from kindergarten? I believe that almost everything I could learn, I learned at Michigan Women's Music Festival. It happened up north, kind of near Ludington, for 40 years. And I grew up with the festival. And it was majority lesbians, but also other women and children who attended, and eventually multi-generational families. Women's music, which is also lesbian music, started out as folk music. But at Michigan Women's Music Festival, women kept stepping up. They kept saying, we're here too. Hello, we're here. Give us time on stage for classical music and Caribbean music and Jewish klezmer music. So I learned about all those things. Women said, we need 12-step programs here so I can stay sober or not use drugs while I'm here. So those spaces were created in the festival. Older women said, we need space for just older women to talk about what it was like to come out and be out now, it's different from you young ones. So an over 50s tent was created, where every year then we made a festival quilt that was raffled off. As lesbians and other women in general became more able to have children and to bring them to festival without risking being outed to family, camps were created at festival for sprouts, for the babies and the little ones, and brother son for our older boys who required space away from the women. There were so many things that were created in our community every August because people said what they needed. There was early on a women of color area that eventually served a good barbecue dinner every Saturday, the Saturday night of festival. But we need to cultivate that more in our general society, to keep trying to listen and hear and make it feel safe for people to say who they are, who we are, what they need, what we need, and to offer help, or if accepted, to help make things happen. Now, when I was young, I was very foolish and thought, when I discovered feminism, that we would just tell men what was wrong and why we needed change, and they would help us do it. I discovered that some fears and ways of being are so entrenched that they're very difficult to change. But over time, it does happen. Some things we don't think we see change, but we're in it for the long haul. As singer Holly Near says, we have to leave some work for the next generations to do. I believe that's true. Okay, so we each can choose to learn or not learn at our own rates. And we can help or hinder other people's learning with our own fears. Now, many years ago, when I was a student at Western, I was a student advisor on a committee that formed the Susan B. Anthony Women's Center on campus. I, at the same time, was forming the first lesbian support group in the area that helped women my age find a way to connect. I asked for our meetings to meet at the Susan B. Anthony Women's Center because they outgrew my apartment. We went quickly from 4 to 30 women. And the director of the center, who was a member of People's Church at the time, was upset that she felt like at the time that I was trying to destroy the women's center that had just opened by making lesbians visible there. Also, closeted lesbians on the campus were fearful and didn't appreciate that. But we're all capable of learning. And some 20 years later at People's Church, she had learned a lot about GLBT people, and she invited me with my toddler daughters to her house for lunch with her little granddaughter. And that's an experience that was important to me because for a few years it hurt my heart, but we come around, and I'm so happy to see that happen. Now, this is just one of my own things that I've learned. It took me some years to learn not to ask folks if they're okay when I can see they're obviously not okay. I've needed to find other ways to say, is there something I can help you with? Some way that indicates that I can be there for them. Sometimes that risk pays off, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, but we have to remember that we're each a bridge to what comes next. Our parents or grandparents may have considered Italian pizza or Chinese food too foreign to eat. We don't feel that way now. You or I might disdain using curse words because they're so used so casually and routinely now, and that's not the way we were raised. The previous generations had to get used to the terms gay and lesbian as they replaced homosexual. Now I struggle with learning and understanding the new terms like gender fluid or non-binary or pansexual. My generation detests the word queer being used in a positive way. We had it yelled at us on the streets, but to young people, that's an all-inclusive, useful term. So you need to consider, I shouldn't say you need to, I try to consider what risk I'm willing to take, what levels of risk, and I have learned to try and be on the lookout to see, to hear, and then to participate and maybe support others as if they're my family, because they are. You know, we talk about the human family. And hopefully we'll get to that. Hopefully we'll see it in spirit in a few centuries. We have to remember that taking risk increases our ability to take more risk, to reach further, to become better humans. And I'm not saying to be foolish, but within reason, risks help us grow and become resilient. Sometimes I've learned to joke with people, and some people have been afraid of that LGBT people will try and convert others to being LGBT. Singer Alex Dobkin says, well, what do you expect? We only want the best for you. And I like that joke, although I believe that we are who we are, whether that's hetero, bisexual, gay or lesbian or transgender, all these other new categories that people have come up with. Now, Kate Clinton says that when you look at the Christian Bible, male and female marriage instruction or relationships, how to behave is mentioned over 1,000 times. Now, gays are mentioned a few times in the Bible, and lesbians are not mentioned at all. So Kate says, obviously, heterosexuals need much more instruction about how to behave. Now, those kind of jokes have helped me over the years to feel more positive about myself, and they help me to have a comeback sometimes, but that's not real conversation. It hopefully is an opening. But to do well in life, we need to find others like ourselves. We need to find support. We need to find heroes and mentors. And I try to live up to the visions of my heroes, one of whom is lesbian poet and writer Audre Lorde. She's now deceased. She died of breast cancer. But this is a quote of hers that I love. When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. So mote it be.
Thank you, River, for your enlightening talk. I look forward to discussing this with you during our coffee hour. Now it's time for our offering. Our lives have been graced by many gifts. If you desire and are able to donate to our church, which still has the same expenses as pre-COVID-19, there are a few ways to do that. You may mail a check to our building. You may give electronically through our church website, or you can give using the Give Plus app on a smartphone or tablet. Your donations are sincerely appreciated and allow us to continue carrying this life-giving message into the wider world.
We've cleared off the table, leftovers saved, washed the dishes and put them away. I've told you a story, tucked you in tight at the end of your knockabout day. As the moon sets its sail to carry you to sleep over the midnight sea, I will sing you a song no one sang to me. May it keep you good company. Oh, you can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know that I will love you still. You can live by yourself. You can gather friends around. You can choose one special one. And the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done. There are girls who grow up strong and bold. There are boys quiet. Some race on ahead, some follow behind, some go in their own way untied. Some women love women, some men love men, some raise children, some never do. You can dream all the day, never reaching the end of everything possible for you. Don't be rattled by names, by taunts, by games, but seek out spirit true. You can give your friends the best part of yourself. They'll give the same back to you. Oh, you can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know that I special one, and the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're dead.
Now it's time to extinguish our chalice. As we extinguish this chalice, let us remember to keep the flame awake and alive in our souls, and let the chalice of the light bind us together, showing us the way. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our closing words. Give us the courage to live boldly in the mystery of diversity, the strength to persevere in the face of adversity, and the power to love in ways that go beyond understanding. Help us create a world where all queer, transgender, bisexual, lesbian, and gay people can flourish. May it be so.